Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us here at the New Zealand School of Dance. I'm Garry, Trinder, Director of the school, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Paula Steeds-Huston, who's the Head of Contemporary Dance, and Gunn, who's the Head of Associate Programme, and also one of the classical tutors here. Whilst you can't see her through camera, we're also joined by our Head of Communications and Marketing, Tony Westaway. And Tony is going to actually be feeding through your questions to us so that if there are areas that we haven't addressed, please feel free to ask those questions. And no question is too small or too simple to ask. We really value that, and we want you to go away from this experience feeling that we have been able to address all of the issues or concerns that you may have. The New Zealand School of Dance was founded in 1967 as the National School of Ballet. It changed its name in the early 1980s with the advent of more and more contemporary dance companies emerging in New Zealand. And we still have a responsibility today to serve the contemporary dance companies and the ballet companies here in New Zealand. Obviously, the foremost ballet company is the Royal New Zealand Ballet, and we're proudly the official school of the company. We are very much focused on providing dancers for mainstream companies. So a lot of our course is based on technique and practical study. We were asked some time ago why we never chose to go down a degree route, and that would change the emphasis for us because it means that we would be placing more of our study in the area of theory and academic pursuit. And we really want to make sure that we're producing excellent technical dancers. So I'm going to hand over to Gunn, who's going to talk a little bit about the composition of the course structure, because there are some academic subjects and you need to be aware of those. And then we'll hand over to Paula, who's going to talk a little bit about the differences in terms of the classical program and the contemporary program.
Right, so the students, when they arrive at school, most will have achieved NCA level 1 or some Cambridge examinations. And so they go on and study, and generally it's in a sort of block course. They do study anatomy, dance history and dance critique, which we put under an umbrella called dance studies. And then they study some music as well. If a student has studied a lot of music prior to coming here, then they are able to be cross-credited if the course is below the standard they've been working at. But they do these subjects for 2 years throughout the what will be the new diploma at level 6. And as I say, they're in block courses. Alongside those, there are other allied subjects which they study, such as nutrition, and they also work on allied technique subjects with conditioning, which is sort of Pilates-based floor mats, and then there is a strong emphasis on their well-being, which we look after with various physios, and we have a student support manager, nutritionist, personal gym trainers, and I'm just trying to think who else I've left off. But they go into these studies with an open mind, and it all enhances their actual technique.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Garry. So when you apply for the school, we ask you at the audition process to either put what course you're going to major in. So you can either major in classical and in contemporary. And the reason why we do that is because we only have you for what we consider as quite a short time, and we want to prepare you for best practice of what your industry is that you're going into. So it's recommended by us and by what our philosophy is around been really clear about what that future is and where that future lies for you. So once you've considered and been accepted into the school, the courses are run beside each other. So there are some subjects that you're joined for, some of those academics, some of the conditioning, nutrition. So there's specific ones where as a first year you'd be all together, but otherwise things are in different studios, and we're really lucky to have amazing facilities here. So we've got the room to have you in the different studios. So as a contemporary major, you would do your contemporary classes, you also do ballet classes, and vice versa for the classical students. So it's really important for the classical students to have that contemporary technique. And it's really important for us that we make sure that you maintain both technical expertise in both of them. In the afternoons or after those technique classes, you do your allied subjects. And for contemporary, they would cover improvisation, choreographics, compositional work, partnering, yoga, we do some tumbling as well. And in the classical course, where we would do some tumbling or coaching, you would do coaching and specifically towards the point work, or for males towards the virtuosity, pas de deux when we're doing partnering. So they do align with each other, but at the same time, they're very specific around what the genre is that you are going into. And we've got a wonderful thing that I'm sure Garry will talk to you soon about the new qualification, but in that there's we found there was a real need for classical students to have those compositional skills. So to learn the tools, to learn how to create work and what that means. And so we've developed a new course around that. So the classical students also get a lot of those compositional elements that you'll need in the industry as well. We have a gym program as well that both classical and contemporary do, and that aimed quite specifically towards what you need physically to be able to achieve great things while you're here.
Thank you. So picking up points that both Christine and Paula have spoken about, they both touched on the situation that we have a new qualification next year. So whoever is successful at our auditions will become the first cohort of students to join us for the New Zealand Diploma in Dance. This sits at level 6 on the New Zealand qualifications framework and will be, upon graduation, the equivalent of 2 years studying at undergraduate level. The course that we have been running, the New Zealand School of Dance Certificate in Dance Performance, was first recognised by the New Zealand Qualifications Authority back in the early 1990s. And since then, we've tweaked the edges of that qualification, but the reality is that we felt as a staff that we could be doing more and we could be better preparing our students to be dancers in the 21st century. And with the advent of technology, the requirement now for greater compositional skills in both classical ballet and contemporary, quite often even ballet companies are working now with contemporary choreographers as well. So we were very mindful that there were some areas that we were pretty deficient in from the old qualification. So we were tried very hard to address that, and we're very excited about the new qualification. And as I say, whoever is successful at our auditions this year will comprise the first cohort to go through that new qualification. What else do we want to raise?
Following on with that new qualification, we will still be offering the New Zealand School of Dance Diploma in Dance Performance, which sits at level 7 on the New Zealand NZQA qualification scale, which is equivalent to an undergraduate degree and affords the students that graduate from here, if they want to move on in the future, maybe 1 or 2 years of cross-crediting into a degree that they might be doing.
I think just important to stress that upon entry, students will all need to enroll in the new diploma, and after 2 years will be considered for entry into the 3rd year, because entry into the 3rd year is by invitation. That for sometimes is an exit point for us and for you as well, because we have to be honest that this is a very tough industry to be going out into, and it's not necessarily going to be for everybody. And some of the students who have utilised 2 years of their training here at the school decide to use the 3rd year and move into a different direction altogether. And that could be anything from Pilates teaching to occupational therapy to arts management. So we have a whole host of different pathways that people elect to go into. The wonderful thing about the program is it gives you a remarkable underpinning, and it gives you the discipline and self-motivation, which are applicable to all fields of life.
And another thing with the new qualification is we also have, like you learn business skills in that as well. So you're learning how to be that independent artist, you're learning how to do your taxes and all of those well-rounded things that you need in life today. So I think that's really exciting as well.
I'm just mindful that we have received already some questions in anticipation of today's webinar. So I'm going to look across to Tony now, who's going to feed us one of the first questions. And hopefully these will be applicable to many of you. They're not all specific. We've looked through most of the questions that we've been asked, and we've tried to pick out those that are more generic in nature and will provide the greatest information. Tony.
What support from the school do students get for those who are living away from home?
Yes, as I mentioned just in my little opening, sorry, the question was, what support do students living away from home get, well, what support do they get whilst they're living away from home? So we do have a student support manager who takes care of all the students, including the international students, should we ever get any back. But they are also, we encourage the first years to go to a halls of residence, which is very well positioned in Wellington, in a good safe area of Wellington. And we've been using this hall of residence, which is attached to Victoria University for the last 3 years. And it's really very comfortable and very modern. The students all have, regardless of the little apartments that they have, it can be a 4-bedroom apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, or just a single one. They all have their own rooms, so their only shared areas are really the kitchen and the bathroom and maybe a small sitting room. Yes, so it's very well appointed. We also look after them in the fact that we have a physiotherapist on site every day. We have a nutritionist coming in once a week. Paula mentioned as well the gym trainer, personal trainer who sets their own program. There's all students have dance conditioning once a week to help with their development in their technique. We have a performance psychologist who visits the school probably twice a term to enhance their performance ability and to get them over any scary moments that they might have going into performance. And I think that just about touches. We have a Pilates studio with a Pilates. Yes, Massey Health, which is attached to Massey University, is where the students enroll for their local GP. And they can also access through Massey Health counselling services, which is all there. There is a minimal charge at the beginning of the year, which is included in their student services levy, and then the rates for visiting either the GP or the counsellor are just about null and void. That's very handy. If they want to go to the GP at Massey, it literally is 5 minutes walk down the road and very easy to access from wherever they're staying around the area. And other than that, Massey Health as well have a very good understanding with the after hours medical centre. So if Massey Health is not open during like after hours, after 5 o'clock and at the weekends, then Massey Health has a link through to the after hours medical centre where the students are charged a much lesser fee for if they do need to see the doctor urgently after hours. So
we recognise also that the halls of residence are probably not necessarily ideal for everybody. And for students who are entering the school under the age of 16, we can assist them find homestays as well. I think it's important to stress that the school is a tertiary provider, and therefore we do try and treat the students at the school as young adults. But we're also very mindful that they are very useful. Sometimes they have not lived away from home before, and they need a greater infrastructure to support them. All of the health professionals that we work with are clearly, they advise us and help us in terms of best practice and best training experience, but we're also very conscious that we need to provide those young people with as much support as possible so that they can get the most from the program. We discourage students in the first year particularly to move into a flatting arrangement because it brings with it a host of problems surrounding independence, lease arrangements. If they're not happy in the flat, then they've got to move out. It impacts on the other students who are left behind, rental agreements. So from our point of view, the halls of residence provide a very good foundation for the first year of study, after which the students have a better understanding of the cohort and know their peers more intimately. And it means that choosing the flatting situation for the second and third year is potentially a more successful scenario for them.
Do allied health professionals incur a separate fee, or are these fees included?
Yes, yes, sorry, I keep forgetting to repeat the question. Are the allied health professionals included with their fees, or is there a separate payment for them? Within the student services levy that I spoke about earlier, there is included 8 physiotherapy visits and what we call a triage card, which covers 5 short visits to the physio should anyone just need some advice about whether they should continue dancing before making a full physio appointment. These are included in the student services levy, and if it's unfortunately enough that the student should run out of 8 appointments within a year, or the small triage card, a new triage card can be purchased, and or the students can still continue to see the physiotherapist, and it's at a very subsidized rate that they get to see a physio, but they would pay for those sessions separately once the prepaid sessions are paid for. The gym, which we use, which is also part of their allied subjects, they get membership to Jet's Gym, which is also included within their student services levy, and that means they can use any Jet's Gym over the holidays as well, whilst they're in New Zealand, or it runs in Australia as well. Massey Health is an extra fee in the student services levy, but then, as I said before, the rates are very reasonable once we get there. We do have a sports doctor who visits the school for any slightly more serious injuries, and that visit is free of charge to the students, as the school subsidises that visit with the doctor.
And all the other things that Christine mentioned around dance conditioning, around the Pilates studio, around rehabilitation, that's covered by the school and part of the course that we run as well.
Actual individual Pilates sessions that they can attend, which we encourage greatly to strengthen. That's also, they also have 5 prepaid visits each year, and that's also included. And then any other sessions, they can use the Pilates studio. Once they've got their, you can use the Pilates studio exam done, they can use the Pilates studio, but we have a specific Pilates tutor who is also trained in gyrotonics, and we're very lucky at the school to have a gyrotonics tower for the students to use.
How many students do you take? I'm going to ask another question first, sorry. Please, can you talk more about accommodation? students, can you talk to them about Willis, the accommodation at 222?
I've done that, yes.
We're just having questions about 222 Willis and the halls of residence. But we feel that we've probably answered quite a bit of that. They have a website, and there's also links on our website as well if you wanted to go in and just see and view. There's pictures up there, and you can see how that all runs as well.
And I just want to say that 222 Willis Street is a very secure building. They have to have access with a swipe card, and nobody else can. And then once the students are been allocated their rooms and are on a certain level, you only have access to that level in the building apart from the common areas on the ground floor. So even the students on the 5th floor can't access the 2nd floor, for example.
How many students do you take each year?
The question is, how many students do we take each year? And there is no specific formula to that. As Paula mentioned already, there are times in the day when the students come together as a year group. So we have to be mindful of the overall size of that cohort, because for the academic subjects, they're quite often delivered as a year group, and we don't want this class to be overwhelmingly large. Paula and myself will often talk through the audition process so that we ideally can try and find parity between the classical program and the contemporary program, because we think it's important to have in the school roughly a 50-50 relationship. It seems to be very healthy from that point of view. But we would look and consider usually between the two of us around 14 or 15 students for each stream coming into the first year. So in total, we're looking at about 28 to 30 students.
What do you look for in an applicant at auditions?
So the question is around what do we look for in an applicant at the audition time. There's no set mold that you need to fit. There's no specific requirements. It's not like we can identify straight away who we want. I think the exciting thing about the school is that we're really diverse in the students we have here. It's really important for us to find people that have the passion, the essence, the tenacity, the dedication, and that's quite hard to see on the first day, just seeing you once. So we're really going instinctually what we feel of you. So don't feel like you need to be anybody else but yourself. We want to see who you are. We want to see what you're like, how you are, how you communicate with the panel, and there will be a massive panel. How you communicate with others in the room as well, and just not so much around what your technical ability is right then and there, but do you have the potential to work with us? Do you have the potential, and are you the right fit for us just as much as are we the right fit for you? So there's not really a clear answer on what we specifically look for from the day, just you.
I think there are some things, obviously, the fundamental issue is that we need to believe that this is the right institution for you, and that we can assist you in moving into the profession successfully, because we don't want to shatter your dreams, and nor do we want to give you false expectation. So it's important for us that I always say that the audition is something of a leap of faith, because literally we only have maybe a few hours with you to get to know you, and then we spend 2 or 3 years working with you every day. So it's, we have to have a sense of understanding that the clay, which is what you're bringing to us, is malleable enough for us to make something from you that meets your expectations and also is going to serve the industry well. So we have to look, sometimes we choose not to take a student if we feel that we're there at a point where they're almost industry ready. Because if they're going to spend 2 or 3 years here and feel frustrated by that experience, because actually they could be already working, that's not going to be a happy situation for anybody. And likewise, if people come into the school who are probably ill-prepared physically, because the fact is you could be working for 20 to 30 hours a week dancing in the studio, and you find that you've only been doing maybe 5 hours of dance classes a week, you could put yourself up for injury. And that too is not going to be a helpful scenario if you're sitting watching classes every day whilst your peer group is making significant progress. So those are some of the factors that influence us when we look at people for audition. As Paula said, we're open to diversity, we're open to different experiences, we're open to people having different ambitions. But there has to be a relationship between us that is going to provide you with the pathway that you want.
Are there any full-time courses for students younger than 16, between 14 and 15 years, including boarding?
The question is, are there any full-time opportunities for students younger than 16 years, so 14 to 15 years, including boarding? At this stage, the school is not registered to take full-time students under the age of 16. So the answer, I guess, is really no. We've long wanted a junior school here, but just numbers-wise in New Zealand, it's proving quite, it has proven quite difficult to attain. We do run allied programs for the students of that age. In fact, from the age of 10 upwards, we run a scholars program, which is based on the students coming in and augmenting their training in their own ballet studio. Then once they get to 13 years of age and entering college level, year 9 at school, the associate program is open to them, which they, and we've just completed a successful weekend this weekend, and they come down 4 times a year, and we see them in open classes in other centres as we go around the country. And that's a very intensive weekend for them, dancing sort of from 10 in the morning till 6 in the evening on a Saturday, and 9 till about 3 on the Sunday. When they become senior associates, which is about year 11, we invite them to come to the school to join in with the first year dancers to actually experience an immersion week and to experience what a week at the school is really like. And they can follow at the associate level either contemporary majors or classical majors. But as to full-time for those young ones, unfortunately not.
There's a number of other ways you can connect with the school being younger. You can go to, we have open classes. We also have contemporary intensive programs as well for those a little bit older. There's winter school that unfortunately didn't happen this year, but will be happening next year. We've also got a new summer intensive that watch this space on our website and on our social media that you'll be able to connect with the school, and that is aged for that 12 to 16 as well. So there's a number of various ways that you can still keep connected, and we can keep connecting with you through those programs as well.
All right, I have another question. Some individuals who want to audition digitally are unable to access adequate studio space, people in Melbourne specifically. And also they can't see a physio to get their physio examinations complete. Is there an extension available to these people?
So our question was around those that are auditioning through the digital platform, around having difficulty about getting into a studio space to record it, or getting to the physiotherapy to do some of those online forms.
It's difficult. Obviously, the whole COVID situation has presented challenges that we as an institution and the whole world has come to terms with, and everybody's sort of dealing with the questions one at a time. My suggestion would be that you present the best that you can. And we would be sympathetic, obviously, to understanding that if you are only able to access your living room or your kitchen, or you're out on the deck, or it's the garage, we'll understand that you are limited by what you can offer. And with the physiotherapy forms, I can only suggest that maybe there would be latitude on our part for those to be received afterwards, in the hope that things are going to improve soon, and there should be greater freedoms available to everybody in the next few weeks or months.
Do you do interviews for people taking digital auditions?
The question was around, are we interviewing those that have applied through the digital platform? And yes, we will be, as we've all discovered through this time, those Zoom connections are just as vital as those that we would interview face to face. So we would be able to offer those that we would shortlist. From viewing everybody, we then shortlist, and from that shortlist we would then interview, because it's really important avenue for us to get to know, as we spoke earlier, about who you are and what it's all about.
Could you tell us what the live audition process would be like?
Yes, the question is can we tell you about what the live audition process would be like? Once you've made your decision about whether you want to become a contemporary major or a classical ballet major, you then will take a class which will be very comprehensive in the technique in those areas. There will be a large panel watching you, probably up to 8 people. And we find that we often go from room to room if there's a slight overlap with time. So the classical tutors will obviously focus on the classical students, and the contemporary likewise, but there is also a big crossover where we come to see the other major. Now that class is usually an hour and a half, an hour and 3/4. Then there is usually a break and we have a discussion. There may be a time when those that we just want to check up, there might be an anomaly on a physiotherapy form, on an orthopedic form, and our physiotherapist may just want to check anything over, just to check you are really hunky-dory to come and train. And then after that, there will be a slightly shorter class in the other technique. As Paula alluded to earlier, we do expect everyone to be able to participate in both techniques while they're here at the school. At the end of that second class, a shortlist will be made, and with a discussion within the panel, and then, excuse me, those that are shortlisted will be offered an interview. Often we split. If there are lots of you really shortlisted, we will split into contemporary and classical and get to know you that way, because we'll be seeing most of you at that time.
There's also an opportunity during the day as well, while you guys are in class, for the parents to go down and meet our pastoral student support manager, and go and visit the hostel as well, and just see what the rooms are like down there too, and any questions that you might have, you can bring them to that platform as well.
So I think we just need to explain that the classes run concurrently. So we have the classical class running at the same time as we are running the contemporary class. And that's what Christine alluded to, moving from room to room, is what we mean that it's quite fluid in terms of the panel moving around throughout the day and assessing you in both areas. The interview, I know it might sound harsh that we only interview those that we're shortlisted in, but it's also fair, I believe, because it's only reasonable that we don't waste your time as well. If we feel that the New Zealand School of Dance is not necessarily the best fit for you to fulfill your dreams and aspirations, there's no point us just sitting talking to you about the weather and things that become entirely redundant. So it's better for us to sit and speak with you and find out, first and foremost, what you aspire to do, what are the goals that you have, and the reason that you've chosen this particular institution. It's also for us to find out if you have a voice, because in this day and age, as you'll appreciate, no arts company can manage exclusively on government funding. So there's an awful lot of additional funding, and it could be through sponsorship or private giving. And it means that as a dancer, sometimes you have to go and be the advocate or the ambassador for that company. There could be some international touring as well. So you actually have to be someone who has a personality, who can speak post-performance about the reasons why they chose dance or why it's important for this company to be assisted financially. There's an awful lot of education in our role as well as artists. So it's for that reason that we want to see people who are animated, who have a voice fundamentally at the interview.
Is it possible to audition without having any traditional ballet or contemporary dance training?
The question was around, do you have to have formal training in order to audition? As we mentioned earlier, like the industry is constantly changing, it's constantly shifting. So if you have, for example, you have hip hop background and you're wanting to discover what contemporary dance is and how that can influence a contemporary dancer, then yes, we are open to those that don't necessarily have the formal training. Obviously, if you haven't had any ballet, we would encourage you to get to ballet, but we would talk through that with you. We hold currently we hold separate ballet classes so that you can learn, because we have a number in the school at the moment, just the basics and the fundamentals of ballet. You're not there to be trained to be the principal of the ballet company. It's more there to help you have an understanding and awareness. So that the reason why we have ballet in the course and vice versa is to make sure you have a greater understanding of how the body can work and how you can articulate different parts of the body. So you don't need to have it. If you have had it since you were 5 years old, then that's great. There's a real diversity in the levels in which you have had that. And likewise with, if you're a classical student and haven't had any contemporary, that's okay as well. I mean, that's our job, is to be here to help train you. As long as you are open and acceptable and willing and want to do it, then of course we will help you succeed and achieve that.
How many hours a week should a student be dancing before applying to study at NZSD?
Well, ideally, the question is how many hours should a student be dancing before applying to come to NZSD full-time, New Zealand School of Dance. There really is no minimum or maximum, but as Garry alluded to, if you've only been doing 5 hours a week, to suddenly get thrown into 20 to 30 hours a week straight off is pretty demanding on the body. So regardless of whether you're doing classical class, contemporary, many students in private ballet studios will be doing jazz or hip hop or free movement, improvisation at competitions and everything else. Ideally, I think the least that would be really acceptable is sort of 12 hours a week, which is sometimes a struggle to fit in. We appreciate after school and everything, and usually, unfortunately, the older you get, the later the classes become at your ballet studio, so there's all the work around your own academic studies as well. But yeah, 12 to 15 hours would be a good starting point. And in any genre, even if you're a classical student, you might only be getting 5 hours a week in your classical technique, but hopefully that's bolstered by doing the other genres as well.
And some of that is around making sure you're physically fit, as we mentioned before. So any kind of like physical activity is good. I mean,
Swimming, yoga.
Yes. Yeah.
What is the usual practice for students coming from Australia who are still attending school? So this person would be in year 10 in 2021. Do they venture straight into the diploma?
Yes, the question is those that are still at school in Australia particularly and completing and would only be in year 10 in Australia, are they able to continue with their academics and would they be going straight into the diploma? We usually find just that at the age of 16, which is the ideal age to be starting, especially as a classical major in the school, that students in Australia will have actually completed their year 10 during the year that they will be auditioning. So they will have completed year 10, or in New Zealand, completed their year 11 at school before they start here. It is possible to continue with your studies outside. For example, in New Zealand, it would be through Te Kura, and we know that other Australian students have their own correspondence school that they can continue their studies with. This can be very successful. We've had many students in the past going on with their studies, but we do recommend that to start with, they're possibly only doing 2 subjects at the most a year, and so it might take 2 to 3 years to actually complete the level they are trying to attain. But we have had Australian students that have gone on and gained their higher school certificate equivalent to the Australian Year 12. And certainly some students here have certainly completed NCA Level 2 or even subjects in NCA Level 3 while they've been at the school.
A person from Melbourne asks, given the current climate of COVID-19, do you think there will be any changes to your intake of international students, or let's say Australian students, for 2021?
Yeah, the question is, with the current situation, do we foresee any change in taking in Australian or international students? First of all, I think we just have to make clear that the New Zealand government sees Australian students as domestic students, so they're not seen as international students. Only students who would choose to be coming to us from Taiwan or Singapore, Malaysia, China, Brazil, those are considered to be international students. So from the point of view of Australians, we can only hope, obviously, that the notion of trans-Tasman bubble is going to be in place by the end of January next year, when we'll be starting our school year. It's very much our hope to have Australian students with us. We've been marketing into Australia for decades now, and we really enjoy the relationship that we have with Australian students. But right now, our borders are closed to anybody who is a non-New Zealand citizen or resident. Therefore, it does mean that only certain students who have been, particularly I'm looking at our 2nd and 3rd year students, who can prove that they have been with the school for some significant time, were able to get back to start with us in term 3. So therefore, it doesn't bode well, particularly, unless we can see that there will be a trans-Tasman bubble by that easy access between New Zealand and Australia.
What performance opportunities are there throughout the year?
The question was around what performance opportunities are there throughout the year. There's several. Every day is a performance. At the end of each term, we have a program called Insight, which is just showing the public around what has been happening throughout the term. And we have a few nights of that at the end of each term, each of the 4 terms, 3 terms. We also have various opportunities of connecting, especially in the 3rd year and 2nd year, connecting with the different companies. So students mainly in 3rd year will go on secondment, and that secondment will hopefully lead to performance opportunities and connecting with the industry, both in the classical and in the contemporary as well. We have things around our choreographic season for the contemporary students in the 3rd year. We also have our graduation performance, which is kind of the big moment at the end of the year where we're celebrating, and we get some amazing opportunities to be able to perform 12 performances on that in various different places around New Zealand. Yeah, is that performances? Yeah. And as I said, there's different things that around that are part of the course as well, where we offer and provide those performance platforms, whether that be to your peers, to the school, to the staff. We share the building with the drama school as well, and so sometimes there's offerings as well, and sharings through that.
What scholarships are available and how can one apply?
The question is, what scholarships are available and how does one apply? The school only has a limited number of externally funded scholarships. We do have the discretion to reduce or waive tuition fees as well. I have to say that it's very unusual for us to provide an incoming first-year student with a scholarship of any kind. Basically, because as I mentioned previously, we have so little knowledge of you, and we might have had one incredibly impressive day where you auditioned beautifully, but we don't know anything about your overall discipline, your work ethic, your level of attendance, how committed you are to meeting your academic requirements. So the first year is very much about us finding a common footing to go forward into the 2nd and 3rd year. Obviously, then for those students who are facing financial hardship, there is an application process at the end of each year which students can apply for financial assistance, and there is a scholarship committee which is convened to evaluate everybody's application. So as I say, you do need to be mindful that if you intend joining the school in the 1st year, it's very unlikely that the school would be able to support you. Saying that, you should be looking at your own local Rotary clubs and Lions clubs, and visit your local MP, visit your town hall, see if there's anything available, go to the library, find out if they have a database of scholarships and funding available. And also that helps us as well, because if you're committed and you are proactive in showing that you have explored every avenue possible, the scholarship committee will be much more sympathetic towards you. As a consequence, this means that a lot of students are forced into a situation where they need to take part-time work. Thankfully, there is a lot of part-time work available in Wellington because it's very much a university city. But it does mean that sometimes people have to work very long and extraordinary hours. So our preference always, on the guidance of our physiotherapist, is that you don't commit to more than 10 hours of part-time work a week, because we recognize that a lot of student work means that you're standing quite often, and it often means that you get home very late and you'll have limited hours of sleep. And if there can be a tipping point to which you find yourself either faltering in your attendance, or it can invoke injuries.
And currently, if you are a New Zealander and it's your 1st year of tertiary study, you will generally be eligible for the fees free for your 1st year.
Are you able to tell the people attending the webinar how many 2nd year students did you invite into 3rd year in 2020? So how many of the 2019 2nd years made it into 3rd year this year?
2019.
Last year to this year. Last year to this year.
The question was around how many do we take into the 3rd year, and specifically this year into, or last year into this year. And rather than give you numbers, I think it's important to say that there is a criteria that students need to have achieved. It's around what happens in third year. Some people are industry ready, some people need a third year, some people it just wasn't the right fit, and we help guide them into the different places. So it's very different each year. There's no set structure on numbers.
We don't actually have the numbers to hand, which is partly why we can't answer that at such short notice. But I think one of the important things is to say that there is an application process, and students need to outline in a written letter to the staff what it is that they're looking for in the third year. And the challenging question that they need to face is, what are they going to bring to the school in their third year? Because, as I say, there is often a point of reflection at the end of the second year. They obviously have qualified with their what will become the new diploma. So they have a legitimate formal qualification from their study here. But the third year is not necessarily something that everybody wants to commit to. And as I say, there are several students who will choose to diversify and move into different areas of study, utilizing that final year.
If, for example, a candidate turns 16 in June this year, would she have to wait until, would she be able to start training next year? Let me just read this question. If you turn 16 halfway through the year, would you need to wait until the end of that year to audition? So you would begin the following year?
Yeah, I understand the question.
The question is, if you are turning 16 in the middle of the year, would you be able to start that year at the school full time, or would you need to wait to audition later in that year that you turn 16 to start the following year? We do take students that are turning 16, but generally are turning 16 by the end of March, because they do need to get specific exemption for leaving school, apart from anything else, before the age of 16, and it would be compulsory that they would enroll in Te Kura in New Zealand, being a school student, but claiming that they were unable to get to a school full time, and so had to go on the correspondence school. We haven't had anyone that turned 16 after the end of April, which is the general school cutoff line, up until now, but there is always a first, but it depends. They will need to be very proactive, getting permission from their schools as well. Plus, we are actually not recognised by the New Zealand Qualification Authority or the Tertiary Education Commission to actually take students under the age of 16, which is why we've only taken them thus far, turning 16 earlier in the year.
Is it possible to receive an interview after the audition and still not be accepted into the school?
Yes.
Yeah, the question was around, if you are interviewed, does that mean you get into the school? We interview you, and then we spend quite a lot of time around who will eventually get into the school. So there is that opportunity, or there is that situation where even if you are interviewed, it's not an automatic yes, you're into the school. That is just a short list. There's also the potential that you go on a wait list as well from that. So you'll receive either a wait list, a no, or a yes.
Is performance in the audition a large part of what you look for?
The question is performance in the audition a large part of what we look for? As I mentioned earlier, fundamentally what we're looking for is people who will succeed in the industry. And we want to know that we're getting people into the school who have the the wherewithal to hopefully have a long-term career. So performance, there is an aspect to which, of course, we'll be looking for people who can perform, but it's not exclusive. There are a whole host of different elements that we're looking for, and there'll be technique, there'll be physicality, there'll be athleticism, there'll be performance, there'll be musicality, there'll be ability to pick up material quickly. All of those things, it's the composite of all of those things that make a dancer a valuable asset to any company. It's not exclusively that someone who performs well is necessarily going to be deemed to be the best fit for a dance company.
How should I prepare for the audition?
It's a question around how to prepare for the audition. I think that, yeah, what we've kind of said already really does answer that. Be prepared to be open, be prepared to do all those things that we've mentioned. I don't think there's much more that you can do. Don't be overly prepared either. We don't want to see something that's been set and rehearsed and rehearsed. Yeah, just go in with the power of believing in yourself.
I mean, I'd just like to add an answer. I mean, if you're somebody that's applying for the contemporary course and have never done a step of classical ballet in your life, give it a go. Yeah, just be yourself, and vice versa. If you've never done any contemporary, give it a go.
I think I'd just like to pick up on what both Paula and Christine had said, that for me, one of the things that's very important at the audition is to see how courageous you are. I think it's really important that you show hunger, you show ingenuity, and you show that you're capable of more than we see in front of us. We want someone who is not necessarily the finished product. We're looking for someone who is open to new ideas, new ways of thinking, and absorbing new material.
What is the oldest you would accept for a first-year student?
The question is around age again, this time the other end of it, the oldest. I guess that comes into the contemporary stream, where the contemporary students tend to be older. You know, ideally around that 17, 18, 19 is good. We have had students in their early 20s, but it's a very individual situation, and we look at you, what you've done, and all those things that we've talked already about what is the right fit for us and things. And sometimes age is a factor, sometimes it's not. So it's just a really individual approach to it.
We've only got 3 minutes left.
Yes.
I'm going to go with one more topic and then we'll wrap up. And the topic is, what are the pathways for work after school, and what affiliations do teachers have with companies and organizations?
That's quite a long question. Yes. Okay, the question is in some ways two parts. One talks about what pathways exist for graduates, and the other one is what affiliations the school has in terms of industry connections. The pathways are so diverse. I mean, they can be from something that's specifically dance related to something that's an environment completely different. As I said earlier, from my point of view, there are certain assets that dance training provides you, which will equip you with skills for life, regardless of which career path that you choose to move into. With regard to affiliation, of course, we're all very, very closely connected with the dance industry. They say that there are 6 degrees of separation. I always think within the dance community, there are probably only 3 degrees of separation. We all seem to know ourselves incredibly well. And an institution like the School of Dance means that it's very fluid in terms of traffic. We have people from all walks of life, all different spheres. We have a lot of industry people who are in the building daily. The thing that's important to stress, though, is because we are a tertiary provider, I feel very strongly that students themselves need to take a proactive stance about their own career path and their own futures. We can provide opportunity, but the students themselves have to have the maturity and the wherewithal to see opportunity on the horizon and avail themselves of it. We cannot handhold a student through their entire career. Our fundamental issue is to enhance their capabilities as a dancer, but they themselves will see opportunity, will see potential employers, and they themselves need to take the next step forward in that situation.
Last question. Please say this is the last question. Does the school offer opportunities for entering the Royal New Zealand Ballet?
This is our last question, and the question is, does the school provide opportunities for students to move into the Royal New Zealand Ballet? And the answer is affirmatively, yes, it does. And we see, we're very fortunate that there is a scholarship that was made available through Sir John Todd that enables one of the graduation class to go into the company every year. So, but over and above that contract, of course, depending on how many vacancies there are in any one year, the company visits the school weekly and provides classes here. So they are following the pathway of the students through the school and express interest to any one member of staff about anybody they're interested in. And of course, there are secondment opportunities as well, and that often leads, hopefully, to employment with the company. So I think we just want to wrap up on behalf of Christine and Paula and myself and say thank you for joining us. We do hope that we'll be seeing you at the audition. Those of you in New Zealand, if you have opportunity to be close to Wellington or visit Wellington, the best opportunity is to come and visit us and spend time with us, see actually what we do and how we do it. Those of you that are further afield, I know that you're facing many challenges right now, and we are sympathetic to those challenges, but just do the best you can, and hopefully at a future date, we'll get to meet you face to face.